Welcome back, basketball fans. So, obviously, March Madness is here. We just been through the opening rounds, and considering what we've got so accustomed to, huge upsets, crazy results, this year has been pretty rudimentary. It's worked out pretty well. If you were somebody that didn't really go with too many upsets and pretty much just went with the top seed teams, your bracket would be looking pretty damn good right now. Unlike mine. Obviously, this is what happens when you are too attached to a particular team. Maybe you don't look as honest as you should, and maybe you take things for granted. And this has happened through the years, but this year I thought maybe I was seeing something other people weren't seeing. Apparently, I wasn't. I was riding with Kentucky, and obviously that blew a hole in my bracket. And because of watching Kentucky all year, I also was very confident with the SEC and how well they would do in this tournament. But currently, when we look at the current situation, the SEC has not worked out that well, at least not as well as I thought they would. Auburn also kicking out also killed me. So my two brackets, obviously with UConn, the number one seed, thinking Auburn was going to beat them, did not work out. And thinking Kentucky was going to beat Houston, did not work out. So hopefully your bracket is in better condition than mine. Let's get through this and break it down. So the first game to look at is UConn Huskies against San Diego State. Obviously, both of these teams in the last 2 years have played great. San Diego State was a sleeper last year, did very well. UConn obviously won everything last year and has been the predominant favorite by most pundits to win again this year and do what not many franchises in history have done outside of Duke and Florida. If UConn is able to do that, they're putting themselves into some rarefied air. And that's why I predicted that they would lose this particular year, because they had to go through a very tough group of squads. And with the NCAA, with March Madness, upsets are the norm. So you wouldn't be surprised if UConn ended up losing to an Auburn or a San Diego State or Illinois or an Iowa State. All fantastic squads, all had great years. So I thought it was really asking a lot for Connecticut to go on and win all these teams, come through and end up beating North Carolina and then potentially Houston or Purdue to win it. So I did pick them to get beat. And at this point, hopefully your bracket is looking better than mine. Hopefully you picked UConn to do well, because now, of course, them against San Diego State, number 1 against 5. It's a great matchup at this point. Very solid. A lot of people were thinking Florida Atlantic was going to really upset the apple cart, but that didn't work out quite the way people expected. And of course, I thought Auburn would be through at this point, the number 4 ranked team. And just depth-wise, with the length and defensive intensity that Auburn brought to the floor, I thought potentially they would really potentially give UConn a lot of trouble. For San Diego State, I don't feel nearly as confident, so I do think UConn is going to get through and go into the Elite Eight. As far as Illinois versus Iowa State, what a matchup. Number 2 versus 3. Played out exactly how the pundits expected it to do. Illinois is a very good team, great offensive squad. Iowa State, obviously we see what a great team they are. They beat Houston in the tournament, the conference tournament, by 20-something points, destroying them and really putting them in a position where a lot of people were very confident with them going on in the tournament. And so far, so good. Now, if they're able to get by Illinois and move in to the Elite Eight against UConn, that would be a huge statement. They'd be totally living up to people's expectations as the number 2 squad. This is a tough game to predict. What I've seen from Illinois, I've been pretty confident. I thought they looked pretty good. But in saying that, I think they've had by and far the easiest road to this position. And I don't think they've had to come through the kind of competition that obviously Iowa State has. And I am going to lean towards Iowa State to beat Illinois and move into the Elite Eight, where they're going to end up facing, excuse me, UConn. And at that point, that's a tough matchup. Defensively, Iowa State's a great squad. They're really going to push UConn hard, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. UConn, at one point this season, I made a video talking about what a unbelievable squad they were. Coming off of a victory, I can't remember against who, but they looked great. So smooth. Everybody was working together. They looked very much like an NBA team, right? Where all the cogs and the wheels were just moving together so fluidly. Then they ran into Marquette, and Marquette kicked the crap out of them. And I was just like, oh, that's what happens when you get too excited too early, right? Because styles make fights. And it's the same in NCAA college basketball. So anything could happen, but I am going to lean towards UConn to beat Iowa State and move forward into the Final Four. Obviously, that's going to be a big ask coming through San Diego State and then coming through Iowa State if they do get by Illinois. But this is the team that could do it. And I will not be surprised to see UConn do it. As I said, I did pick Auburn to upset the apple cart, but that's because of my confidence with Auburn after seeing them play so many times in the SEC, the depth that the squad had, the great three-point shooting, and the great defensive intensity, right? And they also had the length that I thought they would need to beat UConn and potentially put the big man in foul trouble. And once he's out of the squad, he really changes UConn a lot and the way they have to play. And they don't have a lot of depth on the bench as far as height and length. And I thought that was going to be an area that would let them down moving into the NCAA tournament. But at this point, so far, they've looked good. I can't really question. If you look at Andy Katz on his predictions, he, of course, is predicting UConn to go through as well. But he is more confident that Illinois is going to upset the apple cart and beat Iowa State and then meet UConn in the finals, which I'm not against. As far as the games I prefer to see Illinois versus UConn. But that doesn't mean that's the way things are going to unfold. Then we get to our next bracket over here. This is a good one. ACC heavy. I didn't have a lot of confidence with the ACC this year, but so far they're doing well. Right? So far they're doing well. They're representing. So obviously North Carolina, the number 1 seed, is playing Alabama. Alabama's done well, obviously getting to this position. But I don't think, even though Alabama is an SEC team, I've lost a little faith in the SEC. I don't think Alabama is going to be able to beat North Carolina. I think North Carolina has already come through a tougher group coming through Michigan State to get to this position. And I definitely think they're starting to roll moving into the tournament. They have a very good team, good inside-out squad, a lot of experience, great guards. And I think that's going to be the difference. We know usually in the NCAA, guard play is really the key thing to moving forward. If you have experienced guards, generally this is when you dominate in the NCAA tournament, which is why UConn historically has done very well, Villanova as well, mostly because of their guard play. So I do think North Carolina is going to get through. As far as Clemson, Arizona, Clemson ACC team, at this point, it's kind of hard to look over them. I watched them play against Baylor. I thought they looked fucking great. Arizona, for their part, has been one of the most talked about teams all year, has gotten a lot of praise. They obviously have a very good team. They're number 2. Clemson is number 6. Andy Katz is picking Arizona to beat Clemson and North Carolina to beat Alabama. But I'm going to go out on a limb because there's no point doing this. There's no point playing these games if you're just going to play it safe. I'm picking Clemson to upset Arizona. I think from what I've seen, the ACC has proven me wrong. They've proven that they're far better than I expected that they were. And because of that, I do think that they are probably going to do better than the Pac-10 team, which I historically think is a little weak, at least over the most recent years. So I think Clemson is going to upset the apple cart moving forward to meet North Carolina in the final. Obviously, two teams that are very familiar with, and I do expect North Carolina to get by Clemson. But a lot of people are going to be, a little fucked up in their brackets if Clemson does beat Arizona, because I'm sure some people have Arizona moving on and potentially beating North Carolina and moving forward into the Elite Eight. Let me know in the comment section below, which of these teams do you have, Arizona or North Carolina, moving through? Let's see who Andy Katz is picking between Arizona and North Carolina. I think he's going to pick North Carolina. I could be wrong, but I am wrong. Andy Katz is picking Arizona. There you go. So then we get to the next bracket, the one that killed me. Well, the second one that killed me. Obviously, Houston beating Texas A&M. I predicted Texas A&M, the SEC team, would beat them, and Texas A&M was close. They almost made my dream come true, even though Oakland diminished and destroyed North Carolina. I was really hoping Oakland was going to beat North Carolina State, because at least at that point I could say, okay, well, Kentucky lost to them, but at least they went on and also beat North Carolina State. North Carolina State, the number 11 seed, the lowest seed so far, well, the lowest seed in the Sweet 16, but no surprise. This is a team that won the ACC tournament, right? They obviously are playing Marquette, who's a great team. One of the biggest problems Marquette had was injuries, and we were wondering how that was going to impact them moving forward. Houston versus Duke, what a matchup. What a matchup. Guard play for days. No, Duke has been very inconsistent, right, this year. But in saying that, going to the tournament, the history, the quality guards they do have, it's going to be a real tough game to predict. I would have picked Houston easily earlier on, but Houston also has suffered a few injuries, which have kind of stopped them from being the team that they were throughout the year. But I do think their guard play is a little deeper, and I do think that's going to be the difference. They've been getting a solid 3-guard rotation that's really contributed, and that helped carry them past Texas A&M. And Texas A&M is great guards, 2 of the best guards in NCAA basketball, and both performed well all season, but came up a little short, obviously, against Houston's great guards. So I'm predicting Houston to beat Duke. I've never been a Duke fan, so that probably has a lot to play into it. And number 2 against number 11, Marquette versus North Carolina State. Well, North Carolina State has come through the Texas Techs and the Oaklands. I don't think they're going to beat Marquette. Marquette has looked great coming through Colorado, a team that people were very, very hyped on. And one of the players that's supposed to be a lottery pick in the NCAA tournament. In the NBA draft. And I don't see that. He does not impress me like that. But once again, I'm not a scout, so, maybe I will be wrong moving forward. But, I think Marquette's looked good. I definitely think Marquette is going to get past North Carolina State, and then it's going to be Marquette versus Houston in the finals. And I'm going to pick Marquette to beat Houston to move forward. I can't just pick number 1 seeds. Obviously, North Carolina is getting through. UConn is getting through. On this seed, I ain't picking Houston, even though at the beginning of this year, I was really in favor of supporting Houston all year, pushing that Pi Slamma Jamma heritage all the way to an NCAA tournament. Wouldn't it be ironic if Houston and North Carolina State met in the Elite Eight? Some of you may be too young to remember that game, but that would be historic in itself. All we need is a big alley-oop to win it in overtime. But I'm predicting Marquette to beat North Carolina State and then to beat Houston, thanks to their fantastic guard play and how well they've played this year. But let's see what Andy Katz has to say. Andy Katz is picking Houston against Duke and he's picking Marquette versus against North Carolina State. So that's no surprise. Let's see if he will make a big move and pick Marquette over Houston. I don't think he will, but I didn't think he was going to pick Arizona or North Carolina. Huh? How did I jump from? Oh, he didn't even tell us who. What happened? Come on, Andy Katz. Oh, he picked Marquette. There you go. Okay, Andy Katz agrees with me. Marquette is going to beat Houston. Then we get to the final one, and this one is an interesting one. Purdue, the number one seed, a team that people didn't have a lot of faith in after last year's explosion. But so far, they've done well. Obviously, getting past Grambling, which should be easy work, but you never know. Getting by Utah State, a team that played very well, beating TCU. Now they're going to be playing Gonzaga, who just got over Kansas. Kansas had a lot of injuries, so I won't say that was the best version of Kansas. But it is number one against number 5. Creighton against Tennessee. Great game. I've been really impressed by Creighton. They look great. Beating Oregon, beating South Carolina, 2 very good teams. Tennessee obviously got by Texas and got by St. Pete's. I wasn't surprised they got by either one of those teams. I definitely think Creighton was coming through a much more difficult scenario. So let's look at Tennessee and Creighton. Of course, as I said, I was really supporting the SEC based on being really a Kentucky fan and watching all the games all year. Creighton, the Blue Jays, obviously I know, the coach and the son who went to the NBA, but I've been super impressed with the team. And I'm picking Creighton to beat Tennessee. I definitely think they've been fantastic. And I just have a lot more confidence on the offensive end from them. I think Tennessee is a little too reliant on their one scorer. And if he's not really firing on all cylinders, we've seen they just don't win. And even when he does fire on all cylinders, like he did against Kentucky, they still lost, even when he had 40-something points. So one man cannot carry a team. He can help you. He can move you forward. He can propel you. He can give you the boost you need. But if you don't have a team behind him, you're not going to win. And I just don't see where they're going to get their points outside of him. They don't have a lot of three-point shooting. Defensively and rebounding, they're good. They got a lot of length. But I think Creighton is just a far better offensive team and far more dangerous from all over the floor. As far as Purdue Gonzaga, historically, this would be a great matchup. But I don't think Gonzaga can deal with the big man down low. And I think that's going to be the difference in this game. Gonzaga obviously hasn't had the strongest squad this year. And so I do think Purdue, who over the last few years has pretty much had Gonzaga's number, is going to get through. And it's going to be Purdue versus Creighton in the final to move to the Elite Eight or the Final Four. And at that point, Purdue and Creighton, it's a great matchup for number 3 against number 1. I'm going to go with Purdue. So my brackets are going to be pretty much UConn, Marquette, North Carolina, and Purdue. Let's see what Andy Katz has to say. He's picking Purdue versus Tennessee. Purdue beating Tennessee. And then he's picking Purdue to win, which is not a surprise. Then we move into the Final Four. UConn versus Arizona on his card. Me, UConn versus North Carolina. And then Marquette versus Purdue. This is tough, right? You got two number ones, two number twos. You could not really expect this NCAA tournament to work out any better. As far as these guys break down, with no North Carolina State moving through, there's no Cinderella team at all this year. So all the big squads have really done well. And it's a little surprising because when I was talking about my March Madness pool to begin with, I was talking about the inconsistencies we've really had this year, how a lot of the best teams have lost games to unexpected squads throughout the year. And if this was the norm that we've become used to happening throughout the season, what was that going to mean in the tournament? But in the tournament, it's been completely different, really, which is a bit of a shocker. I'm going to pick North Carolina to beat UConn. Not that I dislike or hate UConn, just as I said, I find it difficult to believe that they're not going to have any hurdles that befall them. It's very unexpected. As we said, only Duke and Florida historically have been able to come through and win back-to-back NCAA tournaments. And if UConn can do that, congratulations. What a windfall for them. But I don't see that happening. So I am picking North Carolina. Their guard play has been great. Obviously, they got a monster down low. He's not as long, obviously, as UConn's big man, but I think he's just a far better all-around player. He's a guy who's obviously going to make far more of an impact in the NBA. I think faster feet, he's going to put the big man in trouble. And once UConn loses him to foul trouble, I think they're really going to be in an awkward position. So I think North Carolina State is going to get through. As far as Marquette versus Purdue, it could be a similar situation, but I don't think Marquette's big man, even though I like him and I think he's going to be a good NBA player, the Nigerian kid, I don't think they have the size to deal with my Canadian brethren. I think my Canadian brethren is going to end up putting Marquette in foul trouble and just be too much for them and end up beating Marquette to move into the finals against North Carolina. North Carolina versus Purdue is my final matchup. Let's see what Andy Katz has. He has UConn versus who? I would predict probably Purdue. Yes. So his is 1 versus 1. There you go. Talk about taking the excitement out of the NCAA tournament. Two number ones, two number seeds, both number ones to get through. Andy Katz is playing it really, really safe. Now, who is he picking to win between UConn and Purdue? I know a lot of people going to be emotional if Purdue ends up winning the NCAA tournament because a lot of people have been happy to hate on the big man, Zach Edey, talking about how, I think this was Jay Williams specifically, talking about how can you have a player who's player of the year, but then his team doesn't win the NCAA tournament? Jay Williams sometimes comes off as such a fucking douche because I hearken back to Ralph Sampson, and maybe Jay Williams is a little too young to remember Ralph Sampson. But Ralph Sampson, if I remember correctly, was a 3-time player of the year for Virginia. And Virginia did not win fucking any NCAA tournament. Right? Do you think Jay Williams was shitting on Ralph Sampson and trying to diminish his legitimacy? Of course he wasn't. Of course he wasn't. We know the NCAA is not driven by big men, right? What did Patrick Ewing's Georgetown do? They did not win. They lost. What did Akeem Olajuwon's Houston do? They lost to North Carolina State, right? Generally, historically, big men don't win. What did Shaq's LSU do? They did not win. What did David Robertson's Navy do? They did not win. Historically, the big man is not what drove teams to win NCAA tournaments, right? You needed to have strong guard play to win. If you think about Florida, they had good big men. They had a great team. One of the best squad starting fives of all time. You could match it right up there with UNLV and Michigan's Fab Five, right? That's the quality they had with Noah, obviously Horford, Brewer, and sorry, it escapes me who the two guards were, but obviously both were really good guards as well. And Brewer and the other guys all went on to have long, illustrious NBA careers. So right? They had more than just big men. Big men were not the driving factor. The fact that they had unbelievable team with great depth, that did not hurt them either. But let's see who Andy Katz is picking to win. I predict he's going to pick UConn because he does seem to be a bit of a fanboy with regards to that. But let's see. And yes, he picked UConn to win it all. What about you guys? Who do you have winning it all? How is your bracket shaping out? And what's your final prediction on who's going to win? I did predict Kentucky to win it. I thought with their guard play, right? Four quality guards, the fact that they were so easily able to change up, switch, and have such depth and such explosiveness off the bench, I did think it was going to cause real trouble for other teams. And then when you think of the experienced players, the big man at forward, and of course the shooting guard, and then the three-headed center, right, that they had coming on as well, and depth off the bench, I did think that was going to be too much for teams, especially that didn't have a lot of time to adapt and prepare and weren't used to Kentucky. We've seen what they did when they went on the road this year. They lost to Gonzaga, but by a little. And they were a young team early on the season. They lost to Kansas by a little, right? These were all games they easily could have won against top franchises. And they played them on neutral territory. And it was very early in the year before they had a chance to mature and really sort of understand where they were getting themselves into. So I was really shocked and surprised that they went down so easy against fucking Oakland. But that is the tournament. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Enjoy, and let's chop it up in the comment section below. Tell me who you have winning everything.